Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku has frog quirk but better than tsuyu asui. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air in the examination room smelled of rubbing alcohol and sterile latex, a scent that would haunt Izuku Midoriya for the rest of his life. At 4 years old, the world was a place of binary simplicity. Heroes and villains, all might and everyone else. He sat on the crinkling paper of the exam table, his legs swinging, waiting for the verdict that would tell him what kind of hero he would be. His mother, Inko, sat in the chair beside him, her hands twisting a handkerchief into a tight, white knot. She looked anxious. Izuku assumed she was just excited, vibrating with the same anticipation that made his own skin feel itchy and tight. "Mrs. Midoriya," Dr. Tsubasa said, sliding into his swivel chair. His mustache bristled as he adjusted his thick goggles. He held a clipboard, tapping a pen against the paper. "We have the x-rays back, and the blood work." "And?" Inko asked, her voice trembling slightly. Is he like the other children? Does he have a quirk?" The doctor sighed, but it wasn't the sigh of bad news. It was the sigh of a mechanic looking at an engine he didn't quite understand. "Oh, he has a quirk all right. The pinky toe joint is missing, indicating the next stage of evolution. But the physical manifestations are aggressive." "Has Izuku been complaining about feeling hot lately? Or thirsty?" Inko nodded frantically. "Yes. He drinks water constantly. And his skin, it's been peeling." "I thought it was eczema." "It's not eczema," Dr. Tsubasa said flatly. He stood up and approached Izuku. "Izuku, son, can you look at me?" Izuku looked up. He felt strange today. The fluorescent lights were too bright, buzzing with a frequency he could feel in his teeth. His skin felt 2 sizes too small for his body. "I'm going to check your glands," the doctor said, reaching out a gloved hand to touch the side of Izuku's neck. As the latex finger pressed against the soft skin just below Izuku's jaw, something inside the boy snapped. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was a biological imperative, sudden and violent, like a sneeze or a shiver. A damp, slick sensation washed over Izuku's neck. His pores opened. "Gah!" Dr. Tsubasa recoiled violently, clutching his hand. The glove where he had touched Izuku was smoking slightly, the latex dissolving into a gray sludge. Underneath, the doctor's skin was angry and red, blistering before their eyes. "Doctor!" Inko screamed, standing up. "Stay back!" The doctor barked, stumbling into his instrument tray with a clang. He stared at his hand, then at the 4-year-old boy. His eyes weren't filled with the warmth usually reserved for children, they were filled with fear. "Don't touch him, Mrs. Midoriya. Don't touch his skin." Izuku stared at the doctor, then at his own hands. The skin on his arms was shifting. The pale peach tone was darkening, rippling into a verdant, vibrant green. A pattern of black spots, like oil on water, began to bloom across his shoulders. He felt a sudden, desperate need to blink, but when he did, a third eyelid, a translucent nictitating membrane, slid horizontally across his vision. "What's happening?" Izuku whispered. His voice sounded different. Raspy. Wet. "Mom? Mutant type," the doctor wheezed, running his hand under cold water at the sink. "Composite amphibian physiology. But this isn't just a frog quirk. This is predatory. High-level toxicity in the epidermis. Corrosive secretions." The doctor turned off the tap and looked at the trembling mother and the confused, mutating child. "Mrs. Midoriya," he said grimly, "you're going to need to buy him gloves. Heavy-duty ones. And a humidifier. He's not just a boy anymore. Biologically speaking, he's become something akin to an apex predator." Izuku looked at his mother, waiting for her to smile, waiting for her to say, "That's great, Izuku. You can be a hero," but Inko didn't smile. She looked at his green, shimmering skin, and the small puddle of corrosive fluid dripping from his chin onto the exam table, and she burst into tears. She didn't hug him. She couldn't. That was the day the distance started. 10 years later, Aldera Junior High was a place of noise and heat, a petri dish of adolescent hormones and mediocrity. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a minefield. At 14, Izuku had learned to manage the ecosystem of his own body. He wore a modified uniform. The collar was looser to allow for the constant pulsating of his throat, a habit called gular fluttering that helped regulate his body temperature, and he wore gloves. Always gloves. Thick, rubber-lined gloves that looked like part of a hazmat suit, colored white to appear less threatening. He sat at his desk, his posture hunched. He was trying to be invisible, a survival tactic he had borrowed from the mimic octopus. Unfortunately, his quirk, officially registered as Apex Amphibian, made him naturally conspicuous. His hair was a dark, mossy green, wild and unkempt. His skin wasn't purely human anymore. It had a faint, iridescent sheen, and if one looked closely at his neck or wrists, they could see the faint outline of scales and mucous glands. His eyes were the most unsettling part, large, dark, with horizontal pupils that dilated and contracted rapidly depending on the light. So, the teacher droned from the front of the room, slamming a stack of papers onto his desk. It's time to think about your futures. I could pass out these career aptitude forms, but... He snatched the papers up and threw them into the air. Who am I kidding? You all want to be heroes, don't you? The class erupted. Quirks fired off, fingers elongated, small fires sparked, eyes glowed. Yes, you have wonderful quirks, the teacher said, waving them down. But no power usage in school. Adhere to the regulations. Hey, teach! A rough, arrogant voice cut through the celebration. Don't lump me in with these extras. They'll be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. I'm the real deal. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet on his desk, a grin of pure predatory confidence plastered on his face. Ah, Bakugo, the teacher noted. You're aiming for UA High, aren't you? The class gasped. UA was the summit. The impossible mountain. I aced the mock exams. Bakugo shouted, small explosions popping in his palms. I'm going to surpass All Might and become the richest, top-ranked hero of all time. Oh, the teacher said, checking his list. Speaking of UA, didn't Midoriya apply there as well? The silence that followed was heavy, instantaneous, and suffocating. Every head turned. But they didn't laugh. In another timeline, perhaps they would have laughed at the quirkless boy dreaming too big. But in this timeline, Izuku Midoriya wasn't quirkless. He was something else. The students looked at him with a mixture of wariness and disgust. They remembered the time in gym class when a dodgeball had hit Izuku's arm, and the resulting contact had caused the ball to melt into a sticky, steaming puddle. They remembered how the air around him sometimes smelled faintly of ozone and swamp water. Bakugo froze. He slowly lowered his feet from the desk. Deku, Bakugo growled. Izuku didn't look up. He kept his eyes on his notebook, his gloved hand gripping his pen tight enough to bend the plastic. Yes, Kaken? Bakugo stood up and walked over. The class parted for him, eager to avoid the blast radius, but also eager to avoid being near Izuku. Bakugo stopped in front of Izuku's desk. He slammed his hand down. Boom! The explosion charred the top of the desk, but Izuku didn't flinch. His horizontal pupils narrowed into slits, his dynamic vision tracking the debris of the explosion in slow motion. You think you can stand in the same ring as me? Bakugo hissed, his voice low. With that freak show biology of yours? You can barely touch a doorknob without melting it. I have control, Izuku said quietly. His voice had a strange resonance, produced by a vocal sac that added a vibrating undertone to his words. I've been working on my toxicity levels. It's not about control, Bakugo sneered, leaning in close. He was the only one brave enough, or arrogant enough, to get this close to Izuku. It's about nature. You're a hazard, Deku. You're not a hero. You're a walking biohazard warning. Yui doesn't let toxic waste into their hallowed halls. They let you in, Izuku retorted. It was a slip. A defensive reflex. Bakugo's eyes widened. Sparks flew. What did you say? I said. Izuku looked up, meeting Bakugo's gaze. For a second, his camouflage reflex kicked in, his skin shifting color to match the beige of the wall behind him, making him look ghostly and translucent. I'm applying. It's not against the rules. Bakugo stared at him, disgust warring with anger. Finally, he scoffed and turned away. Whatever. Just don't trip and poison the judges, you damn frog. The class relaxed as the tension broke, but the isolation remained. Izuku looked down at his notebook. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. He wasn't writing about All Might today. He was sketching a diagram of the golden poison dart frog. Phyllobates terribilis. 1 gram of its toxin could kill 10,000 mice. Or 15 humans. I am not a frog, Izuku thought, tracing the lines of his own DNA on the paper. I am more. I just have to figure out how to use it without hurting everyone I love. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the city. Izuku took the long way home, avoiding the busy streets. Crowds made him nervous. Accidents happened in crowds. A brushed shoulder, a tripped foot, contact led to consequences. He walked through the underpass, the air cooling. He liked the cool. His metabolism ran hot, constantly burning energy to regenerate cells and produce the complex cocktail of enzymes his body stored. He felt sluggish in the heat, but here, in the damp shade of the tunnel, he felt alert. He paused. His sensory input spiked. The hair on his arms stood up, not from cold, but from a shift in air pressure. He could smell sewage, rot, and something else. Something malicious. Behind me. Izuku spun around, dropping into a crouch. His legs, heavily muscled and denser than a standard human's, coiled like springs. From the manhole cover, a fluid, darker than the shadows, oozed out. It rose, forming a grotesque, liquid shape with wide, manic eyes and a mouth full of jagged, yellow teeth. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. The sludge villain gurgled. You'll do nicely, kid. The villain lunged. In most scenarios, a 14-year-old boy would freeze. He would scream. He would try to run and trip over his own feet. Izuku didn't run. His brain didn't process fear in the traditional sense. His amygdala had been rewired by the predator DNA. He processed threat assessment. Target, liquid-based. Viscous. Semi-solid core likely. Attempting to engulf. As the sludge wave crashed over him, Izuku held his breath. His throat puffed out, sealing his windpipe. He didn't need to breathe through his nose or mouth. For a limited time, he could switch to cutaneous respiration, breathing through his skin. The sludge forced itself into his mouth and nose, trying to suffocate him to take over his body. Don't struggle, the villain hissed, the sensation of slime sliding over Izuku's eyes blinding him. It'll only hurt for a minute. Wrong, Izuku thought. He triggered his defense mechanism. It wasn't the corrosive acid that would dissolve the villain, but it might also damage the surroundings or cause the villain to thrash and kill him. He needed something to make the villain let go. Izuku focused on his skin glands. Secretion type C, high viscosity mucus. Additive, paralytic numbing agent mild. Instantly Izuku's body became as slippery as a wet bar of soap, but infinitely more gross. A thick, clear slime coated him, creating a barrier between his skin and the sludge. The friction coefficient of his body dropped to near zero. What the hell? The villain gagged. You're slimy. Izuku twisted his body. He felt the villain's grip slipping. The slime wasn't just slippery. It was laced with a contact neurotoxin derived from the blue-ringed octopus, heavily diluted. It wouldn't kill, but it would numb the nerve endings upon contact. My arms. The villain slurred, the sludge losing its cohesion. The tight grip around Izuku's neck turned into a sloppy, loose drape. With a burst of explosive power, Izuku engaged his bullfrog thrusters. He kicked backward. His legs, capable of shattering concrete, slammed into the fluid mass of the villain. The impact created a shockwave in the tunnel. Squelch. Izuku shot out of the villain's grasp like a seed squeezed from a fruit. He skidded across the pavement on all fours, his sticky fingertips gripping the concrete to break his momentum. He spun around, crouching low, his tongue slightly extended to taste the air chemicals. The sludge villain was trying to reform, but parts of him were gray and sluggish. The numbing agent was working. You little brat, the villain bubbled, sounding more annoyed than dangerous now. What did you do to me? Neurotoxic mucus, Izuku stated, his voice calm, analytical. He wiped his mouth with the back of his gloved hand. It disrupts synaptic transmission. You're losing motor control of your liquid state. If you try to grab me again, I'll up the dosage to type B. That one causes necrosis. It was a bluff, mostly. Type B was hard to produce and left Izuku exhausted for days. But the villain didn't know that. The villain hesitated. He looked at the green-skinned boy, seeing the cold, horizontal pupils and the shimmering, dangerous gloss of his skin. The prey had just become a predator. Before the villain could decide whether to call the bluff, the manhole cover rattled again. "Have no fear!" A booming voice shattered the tension. The grate flew into the air, smashing into the tunnel ceiling. "For I am here!" All Might stood there. He was massive, a titan of muscle and shadow, blocked out against the light of the tunnel entrance. He wound back a fist. Texas. Smash! The wind pressure alone was like a hurricane. Izuku instinctively engaged his toe pads, microscopic hooks on his fingertips and toes, anchoring himself to the pavement so he wouldn't be blown away. The sludge villain didn't stand a chance. Already weakened by Izuku's toxin, the wind pressure scattered him instantly. Splatters of sludge hit the walls, the ceiling, and the floor, rendering him unconscious and separated. Silence returned to the tunnel, save for the dripping of slime. All Might stood tall, steam rising from his body. He looked around, spotting the scattered villain, and then his eyes landed on Izuku. He blinked. Usually, when All Might saved a civilian, they were crying, shaking, thanking him profusely. Izuku was crouched on the wall, literally on the wall, clinging vertically 3 feet off the ground like a gecko. He was breathing heavily, his gills fluttering on his neck, staring at the scattered villain with a critical eye. "Young man?" All Might asked, his signature smile faltering just a fraction. "Are you injured?" Izuku's eyes snapped to All Might. The hero worship kicked in, overriding the predator instinct. He dropped from the wall, landing silently. "All Might!" Izuku gasped. He fumbled for his notebook, which had fallen nearby. It was covered in slime. That was a Texas smash. The wind displacement caused an updraft that. "Oh my God, I'm talking too much." All Might laughed, a boisterous sound. "You certainly are knowledgeable. But I must apologize for getting you caught up in my justice ing. I chased this fellow through the sewers." All Might began scooping the sludge villain into empty soda bottles with inhuman speed. "But I must say, young man, you seem to have handled yourself quite well. Most civilians would be, well, engulfed." "I have a mutant quirk," Izuku mumbled, clutching his notebook. "I made myself slippery." "Ingenious." All Might capped the last bottle. "A slippery hero. We have plenty of those in the business of evasion. Well, I must be off to turn this guy in." "Wait." Izuku stepped forward. This was it. The question. The doubt that had eaten at him since the doctor called him an apex predator. Since the kids started calling him toxic. "All Might!" Izuku yelled as the hero crouched to jump. All Might paused. "Can?" Izuku's voice trembled. "Can someone with a quirk like mine, a quirk that hurts people just by touching them, can someone like that be a hero? Like you?" All Might looked at the boy. He saw the hazmat gloves. He saw the green skin and the desperate, lonely eyes. He felt a twinge in his side, his old wound aching. "A quirk is just a tool," All Might said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming more serious. "It is not the weapon that makes the killer, but the intent. You survived today because of your power. You kept a villain at bay. That is not the act of a monster." Izuku's breath hitched. "However," All Might continued, "heroism is a service industry. It requires public trust. If your power is dangerous to the touch, you will have a harder road than most. You will have to work twice as hard to prove you are safe. But," All Might gave a thumbs up, "fear is wise. It keeps you cautious. If you can master that fear, then yes. You can be a hero." With a sonic boom, All Might launched himself into the sky. Izuku stood alone in the tunnel. He didn't get the resounding yes he wanted. He got a yes, but, "You will have to work twice as hard." Izuku looked at his hand. He peeled off the slime-covered glove. His hand was green, webbed slightly between the fingers. He flexed his claws. "Twice as hard," Izuku whispered. He clenched his fist. "Okay. I can do that." Izuku didn't cling to All Might's leg. He didn't fly through the air. He didn't discover All Might's secret skinny form. He walked home, his mind racing with plans for new gear, new containment protocols for his sweat. He was passing the Tatooine shopping district when he heard the explosions. His head snapped up. Black smoke was billowing into the sky. A villain attack? Without thinking, his legs moved. He ran, his stride long and bounding. He arrived at the crowd in minutes. The police had set up a barricade. "It's a monster!" Someone screamed. "He's got a hostage!" Izuku pushed through the crowd, ignoring the glares of people who recoiled from his appearance. He reached the front line and stopped. His blood ran cold. It was the sludge villain. He had escaped. All Might must have dropped the bottles when he jumped, and inside the sludge, thrashing and screaming, causing explosions that only fed the fires around them, was Bakugo. "Don't come near me!" the sludge villain roared. "I've got a new suit. An explosive one." The heroes, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Empty Lady, were helpless. "I can't get close," Death Arms yelled. "The explosions and the fire. There's no opening. I need water," Kamui Woods shouted. Bakugo was struggling. His eyes met Izuku's across the crowd. For the first time, Izuku saw genuine terror in Bakugo's eyes. He looked like he was drowning. Izuku's body moved before his brain gave permission. "Hey! Stop him!" a hero yelled. Izuku vaulted over the barricade. He didn't run like a human. He ran on all fours, his center of gravity low, moving in a zigzag pattern to throw off the villain's aim. "You again?" the sludge villain screeched. "Die!" The villain swung a massive tendril of sludge at Izuku. Izuku didn't dodge. He jumped into it. "Axolotl Regan!" Izuku screamed internally. The sludge hit him. The explosions Bakugo was setting off burned Izuku's skin. The pain was blinding, white-hot agony. But as the skin seared away, fresh, pink skin was already knitting together beneath it. His metabolism roared like a furnace, consuming calories at a terrifying rate to fuel the rapid healing. Izuku burst through the explosion, smoking and raw, but alive. He landed right in front of the captured Bakugo. "Deku?" Bakugo choked out. "What the hell? Shut up!" Izuku yelled, his voice garbled by the regeneration of his vocal cords. He didn't claw at the sludge this time. He knew that was useless. He took a deep breath. His throat sac expanded to the size of a basketball. Sonic croak. Izuku unleashed a compressed sound wave, a biological weapon usually used by bullfrogs to stake territory, but amplified by his mutant physiology. Boom! The sound wave hit the sludge villain at point-blank range. The liquid vibrated violently, losing its surface tension. The villain shrieked as his body rippled and lost cohesion. The grip on Bakugo's mouth loosened. "Now, Kaken!" "Breathe!" Bakugo gasped, sucking in air. "Get off me!" Bakugo roared. He didn't aim at Izuku. He aimed at the villain behind him. A massive explosion ripped through the sludge, finally separating the solid chunks from the liquid. The force of the blast threw both boys back. Izuku hit the pavement hard, rolling to a stop. He lay there, staring at the smoke-filled sky. His skin was stinging, patchy and multicolored where it was healing. He felt lightheaded. He was dangerously dehydrated. A shadow fell over him. All Might had arrived, late, but he was there to block the final desperate lunge of the villain, detaining him with a smash that changed the weather and made it rain. The rain felt good on Izuku's drying skin. The scolding was inevitable. "You are a reckless moron!" Death Arms shouted, pointing a finger at Izuku. "You could have gotten yourself killed. You provoked the villain." Izuku sat on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket, drinking his fourth bottle of water. He nodded silently. He accepted the lecture. He knew it was true, but nearby, the heroes were praising Bakugo. "That Quirk is amazing. You held out so long. It wasn't fair," but Izuku didn't care. He was alive. Bakugo was alive. As the crowd dispersed, Bakugo marched over to him. He looked furious. His uniform was torn, his face sooty. "I didn't ask for your help," Bakugo yelled, his voice cracking. "I was fine. I didn't need a damn poison freak saving me." Izuku looked up. He lowered the water bottle. "You looked like you needed help," Izuku said simply. "And I was the only one who could get through the fire." Bakugo grit his teeth. He vibrated with unspent rage and humiliation. He glared at Izuku, searching for the weakness, the fear that used to be there. He didn't find it. He found a predator who was tired, but not broken. TCH. Bakugo turned and stomped away. Don't think this changes anything, Deku. I'm still better than you. Izuku watched him go. I know, Kaken. But the gap is closing. Walking home that night, the adrenaline finally faded, leaving Izuku exhausted. His bones ached. I am here! Izuku jumped, nearly sticking to a telephone pole in fright. All Might slid out from around a corner in a blur of motion. All Might? Why are you here? You were surrounded by reporters. Then, with a puff of steam, the giant hero shrank. The muscle vanished, replaced by a skeletal, gaunt man with hollow eyes. Izuku's jaw dropped. His tongue unrolled slightly in shock. What? The price of my hero work, All Might coughed, wiping blood from his mouth. Listen, kid. I saw what you did back there. Izuku looked down. I'm sorry. My legs, they just moved on their own. I couldn't watch him die. You have nothing to apologize for, All Might said. He walked closer. Back in the tunnel, you asked if you could be a hero. I gave you a cautious answer, but in that fire, surrounded by pros who were frozen in fear, you were the only one who acted. All Might looked into Izuku's horizontal pupils. There are stories about every top hero, All Might said. And they all have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they could think. Izuku began to tear up. You have a scary power, young Midoriya, All Might admitted. It is lethal. It is dangerous. But today, you used it to save a life. You restrained the villain. You shielded the hostage. You took the pain so others wouldn't have to. All Might pointed a bony finger at him. You can become a hero. Izuku fell to his knees. He sobbed, clutching his chest. It was the validation he had starved for since he was 4 years old. However, All Might said, crouching down, I have a proposal. I am looking for a successor, but looking at you, I realize something. Izuku wiped his eyes. A successor? My power, one for all, is a torch passed down. I thought about giving it to someone worthy. But you... All Might looked at the boy's regenerating skin, the sheer biological complexity of him. If I gave you this power, your body might destroy itself. You are already a vessel overflowing with power. You don't need my strength. Izuku blinked. I don't? No, All Might smiled gently. You have your own strength. What you need is guidance. You need to learn how to be a hero who doesn't scare the people he saves. You need to master that apex inside you. All Might stood up, offering a hand. I'll train you, All Might said. For the UA entrance exam. We're going to turn that toxicity of yours into a medicine for society. What do you say? Izuku looked at the hand. He hesitated, then pulled off his glove again. He didn't want to hurt All Might. It's okay, All Might said. I'm tougher than I look. Izuku reached out. His green, slightly webbed hand grasped the skeleton man's hand. I'll do it, Izuku swore. I'll be the best. The path was set. The tadpole had survived the pond. Now, it was time to enter the ocean. The ocean at 4 a.m. was a terrifying, beautiful void. The water was ink black, churning with the pull of the tide, cold enough to seize the muscles of a normal man. But Izuku Midoriya was not a normal man. 10 months had passed since the sludge villain incident. 10 months since All Might had looked at him, a boy with poison in his veins, and told him he could be a hero. Izuku stood waist-deep in the freezing surf of Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. The beach was a graveyard of trash, a monument to illegal dumping. Tires, refrigerators, broken sedans, and mountains of plastic cluttered the sand. But the real challenge was underwater. Remember, young Midoriya. All Might's voice boomed from the shore. The skeletal hero was bundled in a thick parka, shivering slightly in the pre-dawn chill. The essence of your quirk is adaptation. You are amphibious. You must master the transition between land and sea until the line blurs. Izuku didn't answer. He couldn't. His head was underwater. Beneath the surface, the world was silent and heavy. Izuku's physiology had shifted. His nictitating membranes, translucent inner eyelids, had slid across his eyes, protecting them from the salt and silt, turning the murky water into a high-contrast monochromatic landscape. His gills, located along the ribs and the sides of his neck, fluttered rhythmically, filtering oxygen from the water. He was currently dragging a rusted engine block across the sandy floor of the bay. His muscles burned, not with the lactic acid fire of a human, but with the dense, heavy heat of a cold-blooded creature forced into overdrive. His legs, now thicker and defined by corded muscle that looked almost like hydraulic pistons, dug into the sand. Pull, he commanded himself. Don't use the buoyancy. Use the strength. He reached the shallows and breached the surface. Gah! Izuku gasped, a habit, not a necessity, as he hauled the engine block onto the sand. He collapsed next to a pile of tires, his chest heaving. Steam rose from his green skin as his body temperature regulated itself, the water evaporating instantly upon contact with his feverish metabolism. Excellent work! All Might clapped, careful not to touch Izuku's bare shoulder. That brings the total to 4 tons of scrap cleared this week alone. Izuku rolled onto his back, staring at the stars fading into the dawn. I still feel it, All Might. Feel what? The itch, Izuku whispered, holding up his hand. The webbed fingers twitched. My glands? They want to secrete. When I exert myself, my body thinks I'm under attack. It wants to flood my skin with neurotoxins to kill whatever is making me tired. This was the crux of their training. It wasn't just about building muscle. Izuku was already naturally strong due to the density required to support his jumping power. The training was about suppression. It was about rewiring a biological kill switch. And what is the level? All Might asked seriously. Izuku concentrated. He visualized the glands under his epidermis. He pictured a volume knob on a stereo. Currently, it was vibrating at a dangerous 7. He breathed in, engaging his parasympathetic nervous system, cooling his blood. Dialing it down, Izuku murmured. The faint, acrid smell of ozone and ammonia that hung around him began to fade. The shimmering, oily gloss on his skin receded, leaving it a matte, healthy green. Level 1. Just slippery sweat. Non-toxic. All Might beamed. Metamorphosis is not just changing shape, my boy. It is changing nature. You are learning to choose when to be the monster and when to be the man. Izuku sat up, sand sticking to his wet legs. He looked at the beach, now pristine and golden in the sunrise. He had cleaned it. He had reclaimed the land. The entrance exam is tomorrow, Izuku said, his voice tightening. And you are ready, All Might said, giving a thumbs up. You have the legs of a bullfrog, the grip of a gecko, and the heart of a hero. Go show Yui what the top of the food chain looks like. The morning of the UA entrance exam, the Midoriya household was a whirlwind of anxiety. Do you have your handkerchief? Your tissues? Your hydration tablets? Inko Midoriya fluttered around the kitchen, packing a bento box with enough food to feed a small army. Mom, I'm fine, Izuku said, trying to tie his tie. It was difficult. His fingertips had developed microscopic seedy, tiny hairs that allowed him to grip surfaces, and they kept snagging on the silk fabric. I just worry, Inko said, stopping to look at him. Her eyes filled with tears. You look so grown up. And so green. Izuku smiled weakly. He checked his reflection. The black school uniform of Aldera Junior High sat awkwardly on his new frame. His shoulders had broadened significantly, and his neck was thicker to accommodate the vocal sac and gills. He didn't look like the fragile boy from a year ago. He looked like a coiled spring. I'll be careful, Izuku promised. I won't hurt anyone. And I won't get hurt. He grabbed his yellow backpack, packed with 3 liters of water and high-sodium snacks to prevent electrolyte crashing, and headed for the door. Izuku! Inko called out. He turned. You're not a monster, she said firmly, echoing the doubt that had plagued him for years. You're my son. Go be a hero. Izuku nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I will. The gates of UA High were massive, intimidating, and crowded. Hundreds of students from across the country streamed through, a sea of black uniforms and colorful mutations. Izuku kept his head down, wearing thin, breathable cotton gloves to avoid accidental contact. He walked with a distinctive gait, a little too bouncy, his heels barely touching the ground, His weight constantly shifted to the balls of his feet, ready to launch in any direction. Don't stand out. Don't secrete. Just take the test. He was muttering to himself, reviewing the structural integrity of the robots he had read about on online forums, when he heard a gasp behind him. He spun around. A girl with bobbed brown hair and round, pink cheeks had tripped over a slightly raised paving stone. She was falling forward, gravity taking hold. Reflex. Izuku didn't think. He didn't reach out with his hands, touching her with his hands risked a panic-induced secretion. Instead, his jaw unhinged slightly. Thwip. His tongue, a muscular pink blur, shot out of his mouth. It wasn't the thin tongue of a human. It was thick, tipped with a sticky, muscular pad. It wrapped gently but firmly around the girl's waist, halting her fall inches from the pavement. The girl froze, dangling at a 45-degree angle. Izuku's eyes widened. Oh no. I just tongued a stranger. He retracted the muscle smoothly, pulling her back to a standing position before whipping his tongue back into his mouth with a wet snap. The girl blinked, patting her waist. There was a small, dime-sized spot of clear residue on her blazer, but she didn't seem hurt. Whoa, she breathed, looking at him. That was fast. You caught me. Izuku turned a shade of green that was darker than his usual complexion. He covered his mouth with his gloved hands. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't want you to fall, but I couldn't use my hands because of the... It's okay. The girl beamed, dismissing his panic. It's a rescue, right? Thanks. I'm Uraraka Ochako. And Midoriya Izuku, he squeaked. The vocal sac in his neck puffed out slightly with his nervousness, making him look like he was wearing a ruff. Good luck, Midoriya. She waved and ran off toward the main hall. Let's do our best. Izuku stood there, mortified but relieved. She didn't scream. She didn't call me gross. Get out of the way, Deku. The growl came from behind him. Bakugo walked past, his shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on the entrance. He didn't even look at Izuku. He was in the zone. Izuku watched him go, then scanned the crowd. That was when he felt it. A gaze. Not a casual look, but the heavy, assessing stare of a fellow hunter. He turned his head sharply to the left. Standing near a tree, completely still, was a girl. She was short, with long dark green hair tied in a bow that resembled frog eyes. Her hands were large, her posture wide. Her eyes were wide and blank, yet intensely observant. Tsuyu. Their eyes locked. It was a strange moment of biological recognition. Izuku's brain, rewired by the apex amphibian quirk, catalogued her instantly. Amphibian traits. Rana japonica? Tree frog variant. Strong legs. Camouflage potential. Kin. Tsuyu tilted her head. She blinked, her third eyelid sliding across. Izuku blinked back, his own membrane flickering. No words were exchanged. She offered a small, curt nod, a recognition of species, of shared DNA in a world of fire breathers and telekinetics, and then turned to hop up the stairs. Izuku exhaled. He wasn't the only one. The written exam was a blur of graphite and silence. Izuku breezed through it. His mutation hadn't affected his intelligence. If anything, the enhanced neural pathways required to control his complex biology made him a faster processor of information. Then came the orientation. Present Mike, the voice hero, stood on stage, screaming about arenas and villains. There are 3 types of faux villains in every battle center. Mike yelled. Earn points by disabling them. And avoid the 0-pointer. Izuku was vibrating in his seat. He was muttering rapidly, his voice a low, wet drone. Robots, metal alloy, heat sensors. If I use the acid, it takes time to melt, but the corrosive gas might short-circuit the joints faster, but gas spreads. Shut up! A hand chopped the air. A tall boy with glasses and blue hair stood up in the row in front of Izuku. You've been muttering this entire time. It's distracting. If you're here to buzz like a fly, then leave. The boy pointed accusingly. And you? The one with the green skin? You're leaking. The auditorium went silent. Izuku looked down. In his anxiety, a small amount of humidity had gathered around his chair, misting the floor. It's just condensation, Izuku whispered, shrinking into his seat. Sorry. Sit down, examinee 7111. Present Mike shouted. But good catch. Okay, everybody. Get to your buses. Let's see what you're made of. Battle Center B. The mock city was enormous. Skyscrapers, streets, streetlights. It was a perfect replica of an urban war zone. Izuku stood at the heavy iron gates, surrounded by other examinees. He was wearing his gym uniform, a tight, green tracksuit that he had modified by cutting off the sleeves and legs to allow his skin to breathe. He wore knee pads and specialized fingerless gloves with grip pads. He stood out. His skin, now fully exposed to the sun, shimmered with a dangerous, oily iridescence. The muscles in his calves and thighs were disproportionately large, bunching and unbunching as he hopped in place to keep his blood warm. The other students gave him a wide berth. Is that the toxic kid? Someone whispered. I heard he melted a teacher's hand once. Stay away from him. If he touches you, you'd get paralyzed. Izuku ignored them. He closed his eyes. Target, robots. Non-organic. Lethal force authorized. This was the key. He didn't have to hold back. He didn't have to worry about stopping a heart or necrotic tissue damage. He could unleash the apex. And start. President Mick's voice blared from a tower. The other students hesitated. Izuku didn't. Boom. The ground cracked beneath his feet. Izuku launched himself forward. He didn't run, he bounded. It was a terrifying, explosive movement, covering 30 meters in a single leap. He soared over the heads of the startled examinees, a green blur against the sky. He hit the ground running on all fours, his spine flexible and fluid, moving like a salamander on speed. What are you waiting for? Mike screamed. There are no countdowns in real life. Go! 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 The panic stampede began behind him, but Izuku was already gone. He rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. 3 one-pointer robots wheeled around, targeting him. Target acquired, the robots droned. Too slow, Izuku hissed. He engaged his bullfrog thrusters. He dropped low and kicked off the asphalt. He didn't jump over them, he jumped through them. He hit the center robot with the force of a cannonball, his legs tucked against his chest. At the moment of impact, he extended them. The metal casing of the robot crumpled like tin foil under the sheer kinetic force of his leg press. He rebounded off the wreckage, sticking to the side of a building with his gecko pads. The other 2 robots fired rubber bullets. Izuku scrambled up the vertical wall, defying gravity, moving erratically. He reached the second floor, pushed off the wall, and descended on the second robot. He didn't punch it. He lashed out with his tongue, thick, muscular, and coated in a high-viscosity adhesive. The tongue wrapped around the robot's head unit. Snap! With a violent jerk of his neck, Izuku ripped the robot's head clean off its chassis. Wires sparked and dangled. He landed on the third robot's shoulders. Corrosive palm. He slammed his hands onto the robot's neck joints. His glands fired. A potent, highly acidic secretion hissed as it contacted the metal. White smoke billowed. Within 2 seconds, the alloy softened into slag. The robot's head slumped forward, deactivated. 3 down, Izuku panted, wiping his mouth. 6 points. He didn't stop. He couldn't stop. If he stopped, the adrenaline would fade, and the toxicity would turn inward. He moved deeper into the city. Observation room. The teachers of UA watched the screens with interest. This year's batch is aggressive, Midnight noted, licking her lips. There's a lot of raw power, Ectoplasm agreed. But look at this one. Battle Center B. On the main screen, Izuku was dismantling a 3-pointer. He was fighting like a wild animal, using the environment, sticking to ceilings, dropping from shadows. He was efficient, brutal, and terrifyingly fast. Izuku Midoriya, Nizu, the principal, squeaked, sipping his tea. Quirk, Apex Amphibian. A mutant type with a cocktail of abilities. Incredible mobility. He fights like a villain, Aizawa mumbled from the back of the room, his eyes narrowed. He doesn't face them head-on. He ambushes. He strikes weak points. He uses fear. Is that bad? All Might asked, leaning against the wall, trying not to look too proud. No, Aizawa said, a small grin touching his lips. It's logical. Heroes don't always have to be knights in shining armor. Sometimes, you need a monster to fight monsters. He has 45 villain points, Vlad King counted. He's certainly secured a spot based on combat alone. But does he have the heart? Nisa finished. Let's release the test. Battle center be 10 minutes in. Izuku was panting. He had 58 points. His uniform was torn, and he was covered in soot and oil, but he was uninjured. His axolotl Oregon took care of any scrapes within minutes. He was perched on a lamppost, surveying the street. Students were everywhere, shouting, exploding things, panicking. I need more, Izuku thought. I need to be undeniable. Then, the ground jumped. It wasn't a vibration, it was an earthquake. Dust billowed from the end of the main street. A shadow swallowed the sun, the 0-pointer. It was colossal. Taller than the skyscrapers. Its treads crushed the pavement, sending debris flying. It was a rolling apocalypse. Run! Someone screamed. The examinees broke. They turned and fled, screaming in terror. The psychology of the test was working. Faced with an insurmountable threat, self-preservation kicked in. Izuku felt the urge too. His lizard brain screamed, predator too large. Cannot fight. Flee. Hide. Survive. He turned to run. He gripped the lamppost, ready to swing away into the alleys. Oh wow! The cry was faint, buried under the grinding of metal gears. Izuku froze. His horizontal pupils dilated. He swiveled his head. In the middle of the street, trapped under fallen rubble, was the girl. Uraraka. She was struggling, her leg pinned under a massive slab of concrete that the robot had dislodged. The 0-pointer was looming over her, its massive tread seconds away from crushing her. The other students were running away. They didn't see her. Or if they did, they were too scared to stop. Izuku looked at the robot. Then at the girl. It's too big. My poison won't work on that much metal. My legs can't kick it over. Run, his instincts hissed. You are the apex. Survivors survive. Izuku looked at Uraraka's face. She wasn't looking at the robot. She was squeezing her eyes shut, accepting her fate. No, the apex wasn't just about survival. It was about dominance. And letting a machine take his prey, no, his pack, was unacceptable. Smaaz! Izuku screamed, not a move name, but a battle cry. He didn't run away. He ran toward the Titan. He hit the robot's base. The tread was a wall of moving steel. Izuku jumped, latching onto the side of the tread with his sticky hands and feet. He began to climb. He moved like a blurred green insect, scrambling up the moving parts of the machine. Gears ground near his head, steam vented into his face. He ignored it. He reached the midsection, the robot's waist. He launched himself higher, digging his fingers into the metal plating, leaving dents. Higher. Go for the eyes. He vaulted onto the robot's shoulder. The wind was whipping at this altitude. He was 100 feet in the air. Below, Uraraka opened her eyes. She saw a tiny green speck scaling the mountain of metal. Izuku reached the faceplate. The robot's red optical sensors glared at him. You, Izuku snarled, his voice vibrating with the full power of his vocal sac. Are in my way. He didn't punch. He didn't have one for all. He planted his feet on the robot's face. He grabbed the rim of the central optical lens with both hands. Goliath tear! Muscles that could crush boulders flared in his back and arms. His veins bulged. With a roar that sounded like a tearing sheet of metal, he pulled. Screech! The massive glass lens shattered. Wires sparked. Izuku ripped the entire central sensor unit out of its socket, tearing thick cables as if they were yarn. The robot went blind. It groaned, its systems failing, listing to the side, but gravity was still a thing. The robot was falling, but it was still going to crush the area below. And Izuku was now falling with it. He looked down. Uraraka was still pinned. Izuku pushed off the falling robot's face. He dove through the air, plummeting toward the ground. He needed to get there before the robot did. He tucked his arms to his sides, becoming a missile. He saw the rubble trapping Uraraka. 10 meters. 5 meters. He landed in a crouch next to her, the impact cracking the pavement. Can you move? He shouted. My leg! she cried. Izuku didn't hesitate. He grabbed the slab of concrete. It weighed at least 2 tons. HNNNG, his legs shook. His skin flushed a dark, violent green. He heaved the slab up, flipping it over his shoulder. He scooped Uraraka up in his arms, bridal style, ignoring the contact. Hold on, the 0-pointer was crashing down above them. The shadow was absolute. Izuku looked for an exit. There was none. The debris was falling too fast. He had one option. He looked at a nearby building that was still standing. Tongue, he commanded. He shot his tongue out, wrapping it around a gargoyle on the 4th floor of the building. Bullfrog retract. He combined the jump of his legs with the retraction of his tongue. They flew diagonally upward, swinging through the air like a pendulum. Just as the 0-pointer crashed into the street where they had been standing seconds ago, the shockwave blew out the windows of the building. Dust engulfed everything. Izuku slammed into the wall of the building, his feet finding purchase. He held Uraraka tight against his chest, shielding her from the flying debris with his own back. Silence returned to Battle Center B. Tea time's up. President Mick's voice cracked over the speakers. Izuku hung there on the wall, panting, his tongue still anchored above him, holding the girl. Uraraka looked up at him. His face was streaked with dust. His eyes were wild, the pupils mere slits. His skin felt hot and feverish. You, she whispered. You saved me. Izuku blinked. His pupils expanded, softening. The adrenaline faded. He gently lowered them down to a balcony. Are you okay? He asked, his voice raspy. I think so, she said, looking at her leg. It was bruised, but not broken. Izuku slumped against the wall. His tongue retracted into his mouth. He felt dizzy. The massive expenditure of energy, the regeneration, the heat, he was crashing. I got 0 points. Izuku mumbled, staring at his hands. I spent the last 5 minutes climbing, his vision blurred. The world spun. Midoriya? Uraraka asked. Need water. Izuku tipped over, fainting from exhaustion and dehydration. 1 week later, the silence in the Midoriya apartment was heavy. Izuku sat at his desk, staring at the envelope. It had arrived an hour ago. He hadn't opened it. He knew the math. He had counted. He had roughly 58 villain points. That was good. But he had heard others talking. Some had 70. Some had 80. And the 0-pointer. He had wasted the climax of the exam saving one person, scoring 0 for the takedown. Izuku? Inko called from the hallway. Are you going to open it? Yeah, he said, his voice hollow. Yeah, Mom. He ripped the seal. A metal disc slid out onto his desk. BZZZT. A hologram projected onto the wall. I am here. All Might appeared, wearing a bright yellow suit. As a projection, Izuku jumped. All Might? Young Midoriya. All Might bellowed. It has been a week. I apologize for not contacting you, but I have been busy with the paperwork for my new job. That's right. I will be a teacher at Yue High, Izuku gasped. Now, let's get to the brass tacks. You performed admirably in the written exam. And in the practical. 58 villain points. A respectable score. You passed the cutoff comfortably. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He passed? However. All Might leaned into the camera. That is not the whole story. A hero course that only judges destruction? Preposterous. How can we ignore the most important thing? The video shifted. It showed a clip from the control room. It showed Uraraka standing in front of President Mike. Excuse me, Uraraka said on screen. The boy with the green skin and the frog powers? Is it possible to give him some of my points? He saved me. He jumped into the robot to save me. Please, I don't want him to fail because of me. Izuku's eyes welled up. She had tried to give him her points? All Might's face returned. You don't need her points, young Midoriya. Because Yui looks at more than just combat. We look for the spirit of self-sacrifice. A scoreboard appeared next to All Might. Izuku Midoriya, villain points 58, rescue points 60, total 118, 60 rescue points. All Might shouted. You risked everything to save a single life when there was no reward for it. That is the mark of a true hero. That is the mark of an apex. All Might reached a hand out toward the screen. Come, Izuku Midoriya. This is your hero academia. The hologram faded. Izuku sat in the dark room, the numbers burning into his retinas. 118 points. The top score. He looked at his hands, the hands that could melt metal, the hands that people called toxic. They hadn't hurt her. They had saved her. He clenched his fists, tears streaming down his face, washing over his scales. I did it, he sobbed. Mom! I did it! Inko burst into the room, and they hugged, crying enough tears to rehydrate him instantly. He wasn't just a monster in the pond anymore. He was a student of UA. The door to Class 1A was massive. A towering slab of industrial metal painted with a bold, red 1A, it stood nearly 20 feet tall. For most students, the size was an intimidation tactic, a symbol of the larger-than-life expectations of UA High. For Izuku Midoriya, it was a relief. Finally, he thought, adjusting the strap of his yellow backpack. A door designed for people who aren't just standard human. He stood in the hallway, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the slightly oily sheen of his skin. He was nervous. His heart rate was elevated, thumping a heavy, slow rhythm against his ribs, about 50 beats per minute, his resting rate, but hard enough to feel. He checked his gloves. They were new, sleek white compression fabric woven with a neutralizing agent, just in case his palms decided to sweat something acidic due to stress. He took a deep breath. His throat sac expanded slightly, filtering the air. It smelled of floor wax, fresh paint, and ozone. Please let the class be nice, he prayed. Please let them not be afraid. He slid the massive door open. The noise hit him first. Don't put your feet on the desk. Ha! Who do you think you are, Four Eyes? I am Tenya Ida from Semi-Private Academy. Semi? A stuck-up elite, huh? I should blow you to bits just for fun. Izuku froze. The voice was unmistakable. The scent of nitroglycerin was faint but sharp in the air. Katsuki Bakugo was sitting with his feet propped up on his desk, looking like he owned the place. Tenya Ida, the tall boy with glasses and engines in his calves, was gesturing robotically at him. The class went silent as the door slid shut behind Izuku. 20 pairs of eyes turned to him. In middle school, the silence had always been filled with mockery. Here, it was different. It was heavy with curiosity and a primal sort of wariness. Izuku knew what he looked like. He was 6 feet tall now, having hit a growth spurt over the summer. His skin was a vibrant, mottled green, with darker patches around his joints and neck. His eyes were large, horizontal pupilled voids. He didn't look like a boy in a costume. He looked like a creature from a lagoon that had learned to wear a uniform. It's him, a boy with red, spiky hair whispered to a guy with weird elbows. The one from the entrance exam. The one who tore the robot's head off. He looks moist. A small boy with purple balls for hair squeaked, hiding behind a desk. Ida turned sharply, marching toward Izuku. You are the one who realized the true nature of the practical exam. Izuku blinked, his nictitating membranes flashing across his eyes. What? I am Tenya Ida. The boy extended a hand, then hesitated, looking at Izuku's gloves. He bowed instead. I misjudged you at the entrance ceremony. I thought you were merely a mutant with no discipline, but you perceived the value of the rescue points while the rest of us were blinded by destruction. I hate to admit it, but you are the superior student. I didn't really. Izuku started, rubbing the back of his neck. My body just moved. Oh. It's you! The Deku frog. Izuku winced at the nickname, but the voice was friendly. Ochako Uraraka popped up from behind Ida. She was beaming. You passed. I was so worried. Your face was all gray when they carried you away. Uraraka-san, Izuku smiled, showing slightly pointed teeth. Yeah. Recovery girl gave me some gummies. I was just dehydrated. Dehydrated? She tilted her head. You need water that badly? I'm an amphibian, Izuku explained, tapping his cheek. My skin is semi-permeable. If I dry out, I can't breathe properly. And my blood gets too thick. That sounds tough, she sympathized. But you were amazing. That jump. It was like WOSH. If you're here to make friends, you can pack up and leave. The voice was dry, tired, and came from the floor. The class jumped. Lying in a yellow sleeping bag just outside the door was a man who looked more like a caterpillar than a teacher. He sucked on a jelly pouch, his eyes bloodshot and dark. "It took you 8 seconds to quiet down," the man said, unzipping the bag and standing up. He was dressed in black, with a long, gray capture scarf around his neck. "Time is limited. You kids aren't rational enough." He stared at them. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa." "Teacher?" The class gasped. Aizawa fished a gym uniform out of his sleeping bag. "Put these on and meet me on the grounds. We're doing a Quirk apprehension test." The locker room was a symphony of awkward masculinity. Boys were changing quickly, eyeing each other's mutations and physiques. Izuku stood in the corner, facing his locker. He unbuttoned his shirt. "Whoa, dude." Izuku froze. He turned his head. Eijiro Kurishima, the redhead, was staring at Izuku's back. "That is manly, but kinda intense." Izuku's back was a map of his biology. Along his spine ran a ridge of small, sensory bumps, lateral line organs that detected vibration in water or air. His gills, 3 slits on either side of his ribcage, fluttered softly as they hit the open air. But the most striking thing was the color. His back was a deep, toxic jungle green, fading to a pale, sickly yellow on his stomach. "Is it true you have poison?" Mineta asked, keeping a safe distance of 3 lockers. "Like if I high-five you, do I die?" Izuku pulled the blue pea shirt over his head, hiding his scales. "Only if I want you to," he said, his voice muffled by the fabric. Mineta turned pale. "Noted. No high-fives. Don't listen to the grape." A blond boy with a black lightning bolt in his hair grinned. "I'm Kaminari Denki. Electricity. We're practically cousins, right? Nature quirks?" Izuku smiled tentatively. "I guess so." "Midoriya Izuku. Just don't zap me," Izuku added. "My nerves are hyperconductive. It would probably hurt a lot." Kaminari laughed. "Deal." The pea grounds were vast, bathed in the harsh mid-morning sun. The heat was already rising. Izuku felt his skin prickle. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small spray bottle, misting his face and neck. "Softball throw," Aizawa announced, holding up a ball. "You've done these tests in junior high. But you were banned from using your quirks. That's irrational. The Ministry of Education is procrastinating on realizing your full potential." He looked at Bakugo. "Bakugo. You finished first in the entrance exam combat points. What was your record for the softball throw in middle school?" 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. "Try it with your quirk." Aizawa tossed him the ball. "Anything goes, as long as you stay in the circle." Bakugo stepped into the circle. He stretched his arms, a feral grin spreading across his face. He glared at Izuku for a split second before winding up. "Dai-ai!" Boom! A massive explosion propelled the ball into the stratosphere. Smoke curled from Bakugo's palm. "Die!" Izuku muttered. "Who is he killing?" Aizawa held up a device. 705.2 meters. The class erupted. 700 meters? This is gonna be awesome. We can use our powers as much as we want. Aizawa's expression darkened. The air grew heavy. "Awesome, you say? You have 3 years here to become heroes. You think it's going to be all fun and games?" He smiled, a terrifying, shark-like expression. "Right. Let's make it interesting. The student who ranks last in total points will be judged as having no potential and will be immediately expelled." "Expelled?" Uraraka cried out. "But it's the first day." "That's not fair." "Natural disasters aren't fair," Aizawa countered coldly. "Villain attacks aren't fair. Yuri is about overturning those injustices. If you wanted to hang out at McDonald's after school, you picked the wrong place." He pointed to the field. "Welcome to the Department of Heroics." Izuku felt a chill that had nothing to do with his cold blood. "Expulsion." He looked at All Might's words in his memory. "You have to work twice as hard." He clenched his gloved fists. "I won't be last. I am the apex." Test 1, 50-meter dash. The students lined up in pairs. First up were Ida and tsuyu Azui. Ida was a machine. His engines roared, and he crossed the line in 3.04 seconds. "Ribbit," tsuyu said, hopping in long, graceful arcs. She finished in 5.58 seconds. Next pair, the robot called out. Midoriya Izuku. Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku stepped to the line. He didn't stand in a sprinter's crouch. He dropped to all fours, his fingertips digging into the dirt, his rear elevated, his massive leg muscles bunched up, visibly shifting under his skin. Bakugo scoffed. Look at you. A literal toad. Start. Bang. Bakugo propelled himself with explosions, flying low to the ground. Boom boom boom. But Izuku didn't run. He exploded with kinetic energy. Bullfrog thruster. He kicked the ground so hard a small crater formed at the starting line. He was airborne, a green torpedo. He covered 20 meters in the first leap, his body streamlined, arms tucked against his sides. He landed on his hands and feet, his spine flexing like a whip, and launched again instantly. It was a gallop. Violent, efficient, and terrifyingly fast. He crossed the line. 3.10 seconds. The robot announced. Bakugo crossed a split second later. 4.13 seconds. Bakugo skidded to a halt, staring at the scoreboard. He had lost. In pure speed, without the wind-up time of his explosions, the frog was faster. TCH. Bakugo kicked the dirt. Lucky jump, Deku! Izuku stood up, dusting off his hands. He was panting slightly, his gills fluttering. It's not luck, Kaken. It's anatomy. Test 2, grip strength. Izuku took the dynamometer. It was a digital device designed to measure crushing force. Beside him, a large boy with multiple arms, Shoji, scored 540 kilograms. Whoa! The class marveled. Izuku looked at the device. He peeled off his glove for this one. His hand was slightly larger than a human's, with thick, sticky pads on the fingertips and palm. Adhesion plus compression, he thought. He squeezed. His muscles didn't just contract, they hardened. The hydraulic density of his mutation allowed for incredible bursts of static strength. Crack! The plastic casing of the device splintered. Error, the machine beeped. The screen read error. Sensei? Izuku held up the broken toy. It stopped measuring at 700. Aizawa didn't look up from his clipboard. We'll count it as 700. Try not to break school property, Midoriya. Sorry. Test 3, standing long jump. This was his specialty. Bakugo cleared the sandbox with a blast. A boy with a laser navel shot himself across. Izuku stepped up. He took a deep breath. He didn't need a running start. He squatted low, his knees touching his chest. Jump, he soared. It wasn't a human jump, it was a launch. He went up, high into the air, clearing the sandbox, the grass beyond it, and nearly landing on the fence surrounding the track. He landed in a crouch, sticking the landing perfectly. Clearance, entire pit, the robot noted. As he walked back, he felt a presence beside him. Karo. He turned. It was Tsuyu Azuri. She was looking at him with her large, dark eyes. Her finger was tapped against her chin. You're like me, she said bluntly. But more. Izuku blinked. Azuri-san? Call me Tsuyu, she said. I can jump far. But you jump twice as far. And you're faster. Whatever frog you are, it's not a normal one. I'm a composite, Izuku admitted quietly. A mutation that pulls from everything. Frogs, salamanders, newts. Even some ocean life. Tsuyu nodded slowly. I see. I'm a tree frog. I have a stomach stickiness and camouflage. Do you have camouflage? Yes. Izuku's skin rippled, shifting from green to the gray of the concrete path for a second before shifting back. Cool, Tsuyu said. She didn't seem jealous. She seemed intrigued. We should train together. Us amphibians have to stick together in the winter, or we freeze. Izuku smiled, a genuine, warm smile. I'd like that, Tsuyu-chan. Just don't eat any flies I'm aiming for, she joked, hopping away. Test 4, repeated side steps. Mineta was the king of this, bouncing off his balls. Izuku did well, his reaction time and sticky feet allowing him to change direction instantly without losing momentum. But he wasn't the fastest here. His bulk worked against him in tight, rapid movements. Test 5, the ball throw. They were back at the circle. Uraraka had just gone. She touched the ball, floated it, and Aizawa showed the result, infinity. The class lost their minds. Infinity? That's cheating. That's amazing. Midoriya, Aizawa called. You're up. Izuku walked to the circle. The pressure was mounting. He was doing well, top of the class in speed and jump, high in grip. But this was the hero course. Versatility mattered. He picked up the ball. In middle school, he couldn't throw very far. His upper body strength was fine, but his throwing mechanics were human. But I don't have to throw like a human, he looked at Aizawa. The teacher was watching him like a hawk. Or rather, like a tired cat watching a mouse. Izuku held the ball. He could just throw it. With his arm strength, he could probably hit 100 meters. But Bakugo hit 700. If he wanted to be the apex, he couldn't just be strong. He had to be extraordinary. He opened his mouth. The class gasped. Whoa, is he gonna eat it? Gross. Izuku ignored them. He extended his tongue. It was a terrifying muscle, pink, thick, and over 2 meters long when fully extended. He wrapped the tip of his tongue around the ball. The adhesive mucus bonded instantly. He stood in the center of the circle. He planted his feet wide, his claws digging into the dirt for traction. He began to spin. It was like a hammer throw. He whipped his head around, his neck muscles, reinforced for exactly this kind of stress, bulging. His tongue became a whip, a tether. The ball blurred. Faster. Faster. He was a green tornado. The sound of the ball cutting the air began to whine. Whir. He was ready to release. He channeled his energy into his neck and jaw. Suddenly, the world stopped. The strength in his tongue vanished. The adhesive mucus dried up instantly. The ball slipped. He stumbled, the centrifugal force throwing him off balance. He barely caught himself. What? He touched his mouth. His tongue was limp. His skin felt dry. The power, the underlying hum of his biology, was gone. He felt just like a normal boy with green skin. He looked up. Shota Aizawa was staring at him. His hair was floating, defying gravity. His eyes were glowing a piercing red. The capture scarf was floating around him like a serpent. I erased your quirk, Aizawa said flatly. Erased? Izuku rasped. His vocal sac was deflated. But I'm a mutant type. I can't erase your physical shape, Aizawa explained, walking closer. I can't make your gills disappear or your skin turn beige. But I can target the active factors. The hypersecretion of fluids, the rapid-fire muscle contractions, the toxin production. Aizawa stopped a foot away from Izuku. He lowered his voice so only Izuku could hear. I saw the entrance exam. You didn't save that girl with brute strength alone. You climbed. You tore. You acted like a wild animal. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. And today, I see you holding back. You're wearing those gloves. You're constantly spraying yourself with water. You're terrified of your own biology, aren't you? Izuku flinched. I have poison. If I lose control, if you can't control it, you're a liability, Aizawa snapped. You think a villain will wait for you to put on your safety gloves? You think a hostage cares if you're scary? All might save people with a smile. You have the hardware of a monster, Midoriya. The question is, do you have the software of a hero? Aizawa blinked. His hair fell. I've returned your quirk. Aizawa turned around. You have 2 throws left. Don't hold back. Use your biology. All of it. Or go home. Izuku stood there, the heat returning to his skin. The mucus glands reactivated. His tongue twitched, regaining its strength. He's right. Izuku looked at the ball. I'm trying to be a polite hero. A clean hero. But my quirk isn't clean. It's swampy. It's visceral. Use it all. Izuku picked up the ball again. He wrapped his tongue around it. But this time, he didn't just stand there. He dropped into a crouch. He engaged the bullfrog thrusters in his legs. He spun again. But this time, he added a vertical element. He hopped as he spun, adding the massive kinetic energy of his legs to the torque of his neck. Spin. 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 The whine became a shriek. Smash! Izuku yelled, the word garbled by his tongue being out. He snapped his head forward. At the exact moment of release, he uncoiled his tongue with explosive force, like a chameleon striking a fly, but magnified 1,000 times. Crack boom. The ball didn't just fly. It broke the sound barrier. A sonic cone appeared briefly in front of Izuku's face. The shockwave kicked up a cloud of dust that covered the entire circle. The ball vanished into the sky. It twinkled then disappeared. Silence reigned on the field. Aizawa looked at his device. He beeped it. He turned the screen to the class. 1008.0 meters. Over a kilometer. Kaminari whispered. Holy crap. Izuku stood panting. His tongue hung out, limp and tired. He slowly retracted it, wiping the slime from his chin. His hand throbbed, not from pain, but from the rush of blood. He looked at Aizawa. He clenched his fist. His skin shimmered with a faint, rainbow oil slick of excitement. Izuku said, his voice deep and vibrating. I can still move, sensei. Aizawa looked at the boy. He saw the predator in the eyes, but he also saw the control. The restraint was gone, replaced by precision. A creepy smile spread across Aizawa's face. Not bad, he muttered. DKU. The screen shattered the moment. Bakugo was charging. His hands were popping with explosions. His face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. What was that? You damn nerd. Since when can you do that? Tell me. He was fast. He was going to blast Izuku right in the face. Izuku didn't flinch. He lowered his center of gravity. His nictitating membranes slid shut to protect his eyes from the flash. He prepared to secrete the numbing agent. Whish. Suddenly, Bakugo was yanked backward. The gray capture scarf wrapped around him tight, binding his arms to his torso. Gah! What the? Bakugo struggled. This cloth, it's stiff. It's a capture weapon made of carbon fiber and a special metal alloy, Aizawa said, holding the other end of the scarf. His hair was floating again. Stand down. Why? Bakugo roared. He's cheating. He's a pebble. He's supposed to be below me. He threw the ball further than you, Aizawa said dryly. And you're wasting my time. My eyes are dry. He released Bakugo. The blond boy stumbled, glaring at Izuku with a hatred that burned hotter than his explosions. Izuku met the gaze. He didn't look down. He didn't apologize. He just breathed, his gills fluttering. The results. The sun was setting by the time the tests were done. The class gathered around a holographic display. The total scores are simply the aggregate of your performance across all 8 events, Aizawa explained. I won't bore you with the math. He pressed a button. The list appeared. 1. Midoriya Izuku. 2. Yaoyorozu Momo. 3. Bakugo Katsuki. 4. Todoroki Shoto. 5. Ida Tenya. 20. Hagakure Toru, Invisible Girl. Izuku stared at the top of the list. Number 1. He had dominated the dash, the jump, the grip strength, and the ball throw. His only average scores were in the toe touch. His muscles were too dense for extreme flexibility, and the distance run, he overheated quickly. But his raw physical stats were simply in a different league. Momo was second because she had created tools to ace every test perfectly. Bakugo was third. His explosions were powerful, but his base physical stats without them were just very athletic human, whereas Izuku was biological tank. Midoriya got first. Uraraka cheered quietly. That's amazing. He beat the elites, Kirishima whispered, impressed. Bakugo was staring at the screen. He wasn't screaming anymore. He was shaking. It was a silent, vibrating rage. Being third was worse than being last. Being third meant there were 2 people better than him, and one of them was the bug he used to squash. By the way, Aizawa said, turning off the projection. The expulsion thing was a lie. Huh? The class screamed. It was a logical ruse to draw out your upper limits, Aizawa said with a bored expression. Of course it was, Momo Yaoyorozu said with a sigh. It was quite obvious if you thought about it. Izuku, frantically checking his heart rate, did not think it was obvious. However, Aizawa added, his eyes drifting to the invisible girl at the bottom of the list. That doesn't mean you're safe. Yui will test you every day. If you don't improve, I will cut you loose. Dismissed. He walked away, dragging his sleeping bag. After school, Izuku walked toward the gate, his body aching but his spirit soaring. He had done it. He had proven he belonged. Deku. Izuku stopped. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The smell of burned sugar and anger was distinct. Kaken, Izuku said, turning slowly. Bakugo stood 10 feet away. The setting sun cast long shadows, making them look like duelists. You think you've won? Bakugo asked, his voice low and dangerous. You think because you grew some frog legs and a long tongue, you're better than me? I don't think I'm better, Izuku said calmly. I just think I'm not beneath you anymore. Bakugo flinched. That hit harder than an insult. You're just a bug, Bakugo spat. A toxic, slimy bug. And bugs get squashed. Watch your back, Deku. At the battle trials. I'm going to roast you. Bakugo turned and stormed off. Izuku watched him go. He touched his chest. His heart was beating steady and strong. Midoriya-chan. Tsuyu hopped over, with Uraraka and Ida following. Want to walk to the station with us? Uraraka asked. We're going to get snacks. I'd love to, Izuku smiled. You were awesome today, Tsuyu said bluntly. But you need to teach me that tongue throw. It was scary, but cool. It was a trebuchet mechanic, Izuku began to explain, his hands moving excitedly. I used the elasticity of the muscle fibers combined with the centrifugal force. As he walked away with his new pack, his new friends, Izuku Midoriya realized something. The pond was getting bigger. And for the first time, he wasn't just surviving in it. He was thriving. The locker room smelled of industrial disinfectant and nervous sweat. It was a scent Izuku Midoriya was beginning to associate with the precipice of something life-changing. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of his hero costume. It wasn't the flashy, primary-colored spandex of a traditional hero. It was a marvel of biosupport engineering, designed by a support company that specialized in mutant physiology. The suit was a deep, sleek teal, almost black, made of a moisture-retentive polymer that mimicked the mucous membrane of an amphibian. It hugged his frame tightly, showing off the unnerving density of his muscles. Along the ribs and neck, breathable vents allowed his gills to flutter freely, while thin, translucent tubes ran from a hydration pack on his back directly to the absorbent patches on his wrists and neck, ensuring he didn't dry out during combat. He pulled on his gloves. They were white, reinforced with Kevlar, but the fingertips were open, exposing the sticky, rough pads of his CD. On his legs, heavy-duty greaves protected his shins, the primary weapons of his arsenal, designed to absorb the impact of his bone-crushing kicks. He looked less like a superhero and more like a tactical diver mixed with a creature from a biological horror film. Midoriya, that suit is intense, Eijiro Kirishima commented, struggling to pull his own gear over his hardened shoulders. It looks like something a special ops team would wear into a swamp. Izuku turned, his horizontal pupils contracting in the harsh light. It has to be. My body temperature fluctuates rapidly. If I wear standard fabric, I overheat and my skin cracks. Manly, Kirishima grinned, giving a thumbs up. Practicality is key. Across the room, Katsuki Bakugo was silent. He was already dressed in his black tank top and baggy pants, the massive grenadier gauntlets resting on the bench beside him. He wasn't looking at anyone. He was staring at the wall, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Izuku felt the hostility rolling off the blonde in waves. It tasted like ozone and burnt sugar on his tongue. He's waiting, Izuku thought, his stomach churning with a mix of anxiety and a cold, predatory anticipation. He's been waiting for this since we were 4. Ground Beta. I am here! All Might's voice boomed through the fake city, echoing off the concrete canyons. Coming through the door like a hero, the class gasped in awe as the symbol of peace marched into the monitoring room, his cape billowing in a wind that didn't exist. Welcome to the battle trial, All Might announced, striking a pose. Heroism is not just about punching villains in the street. It is about indoor combat. Capture. Retrieval. Strategy. He pulled a small box from his pocket. We will determine the teams by drawing lots. Izuku watched the screen as the names were paired. Fate, it seemed, had a sense of humor. Or perhaps, in a world governed by quirks, destiny was just another mutation. Team A, Heroes Izuku Midoriya Ochako Uraraka. Team D, villains Katsuki, Bakugo, Tenya, Ida. Izuku froze. Beside him, Uraraka gulped. We're up against Bakugo? She whispered, her face paling. And Ida? That's a scary combo. It's the worst possible combo, Izuku muttered. His eyes drifted across the group to meet Bakugo's. Bakugo was grinning. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was a rictus of violence. He drew a thumb across his neck, his red eyes burning. The first match. All Might shouted, pointing at the screen. Team A versus Team D. The villains will guard a nuclear weapon on the 5th floor. The heroes have 15 minutes to capture the villains or touch the weapon. The planning phase. The air in front of the building was heavy. Izuku and Uraraka stood by the entrance, studying the blueprints All Might had provided. Okay, Uraraka said, trying to sound brave. Ida is fast, and Bakugo is, well, explosive. What's the plan, Midoriya? Izuku stared at the map. His brain was working differently today. Usually, he would analyze quirks, weaknesses, environmental factors. He was still doing that, but under the surface, the apex instinct was roaring. Target, explosive. High threat. Volatile. Territorial. Kaken won't care about the weapon, Izuku said quietly. His voice had dropped an octave, the vocal sac in his neck vibrating. He doesn't care about the test. He wants to hurt me. He wants to prove that I'm still beneath him. Uraraka looked at him, concerned. So he's going to abandon Ida? 100%, Izuku nodded. He'll come for me the second we step inside. He wants a duel. Izuku looked at Uraraka. Uraraka-san, I need you to go for the weapon. I'll draw his fire, but... She hesitated. Can you handle him alone? His explosions are huge. Izuku turned to her. For a second, the sunlight caught the iridescent scales on his cheekbones, making them flash like a warning sign. I'm not going to fight him like a hero, Uraraka-san, Izuku said. I can't. If I try to trade punches with him, I lose. His quirk has too much raw destructive power. He tapped the side of his head. I'm going to hunt him. Uraraka shivered. It wasn't the answer she expected, but looking at the determined, almost cold set of his jaw, she nodded. Okay. I'll trust you. I'll get the weapon. Start. All Might's voice crackled over the speakers. The infiltration. They entered through a second-story window using Izuku's tongue as a grapple. They moved silently down the hallway. The building was dark, the shadows long and deep. Smell, Izuku commanded himself. He inhaled deeply. The air was stale, smelling of dust and concrete. But underneath that, sulfur. Sweat. Nitroglycerin. Get back! Izuku hissed, shoving Uraraka. Boom! The wall next to them exploded. Debris and smoke filled the corridor. Bakugo emerged from the smoke, his gauntlets smoking, a feral snarl on his face. DKU! He roared, launching another right hook. Izuku didn't block. Blocking was for things with shells. He used his bullfrog thrusters. He dropped into a crouch and launched himself backward, skidding across the floor on his hands and feet like a spider. Uraraka, go! Izuku shouted. Right. She tapped herself, floating over the smoke and sprinting down the adjacent hallway. Bakugo started to chase her, then stopped. He turned back to Izuku. I'll deal with round face later, Bakugo spat, popping his knuckles. Sparks flew. Right now, I'm gonna turn you into fried frog legs. Izuku stood up slowly. He adjusted his gloves. You're predictable, Kaken. Shut up. Bakugo launched himself forward, using his explosions as propulsion. He was fast. Terrifyingly fast. He closed the distance in a second, swinging a massive explosion at Izuku's face. Izuku's nictitating membranes slid shut to protect his eyes from the blinding light. He ducked under the swing, feeling the heat singe the top of his hair. He didn't counterattack. He leaped. With a powerful kick off the wall, Izuku shot up toward the ceiling. His sticky fingers and toes grabbed the concrete. He scuttled into the darkness of the overhead pipes. Running away? Bakugo screamed, blasting the ceiling. But Izuku was already gone. The hunt. The building was a labyrinth of concrete pillars and shadows. For Bakugo, it was a frustrating maze. For Izuku, it was a playground. Izuku moved through the ventilation ducts and along the high beams. His heart rate was slow, controlled. His skin had shifted. Active mutation, chroma skin. It wasn't perfect invisibility like Hagakure. It was adaptive camouflage. His skin cells, filled with chromatophores like a cuttlefish, rapidly changed pigment to match the gray concrete and the dark shadows. Against the ceiling, he was a ghost, a ripple in the air. Below him, Bakugo was stalking the halls. "Where are you?" Bakugo yelled, blasting a door off its hinges. "Stop hiding, you slimy coward!" Izuku watched him from above. He analyzed the sweat glistening on Bakugo's neck. He's angry. Sweat production is high. Explosions will be potent. But his guard is sloppy. He's looking left and right, not up. Izuku needed to weaken him. He couldn't just drop on him. Bakugo's reflexes were superhuman. If Izuku touched him, Bakugo would blast him point blank. I need to paralyze him. Or tire him out. Izuku reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a small, weighted sphere, a capture tape ball provided by Yue. He waited until Bakugo passed under a crossbeam. Izuku unhinged his jaw slightly. His tongue shot out, silent and deadly. It wrapped around the capture ball. He whipped his head. The ball flew, bouncing off the far wall with a loud clang. Bakugo spun around, firing a massive blast at the sound. Die! The explosion rocked the hallway. Smoke billowed. Izuku moved while the sound masked his noise. He dropped from the ceiling behind Bakugo, landing silently on his padded toes. He didn't strike. He breathed out. Secretion type D, hallucinogenic pheromone, trace amount. It was a risky move. It wasn't a combat toxin, but a mild disorientation agent derived from certain toad species. He let his pores open, releasing a faint, musk-like mist into the air. Bakugo coughed, waving the smoke away. What is this smell? Rotting fish? Izuku blended into the wall again, his skin turning a mottled gray. Bakugo stumbled slightly. Damn it, why is it so hot in here? It's working, Izuku thought. His depth perception is shifting. I know you're there. Bakugo screamed, spinning in a circle, firing random blasts. Come out and fight me. Izuku's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, amplified by the acoustics of the hallway. You're fighting the wrong enemy, Kaken. You're fighting your own ego. Shut up! Bakugo roared. He placed his hand against a load-bearing pillar. If you won't come out, I'll bring the whole building down. He's bluffing, Izuku thought. No, he's not. He's crazy. Bakugo pulled the pin on his gauntlet. This storage unit holds my sweat, Bakugo grinned maniacally. If I ignite it, young Bakugo, stop. All Might's voice boomed over the comms. Are you trying to kill him? He won't die if he dodges. Bakugo pulled the trigger. Boom. It wasn't an explosion. It was a calamity. A tunnel of fire incinerated the hallway. The wall Izuku was clinging to disintegrated. The shockwave shattered windows 3 floors up. Izuku had no choice. He couldn't dodge that. He crossed his arms over his face. Axolotl Regan, overdrive. The fire engulfed him. The monitor room. The class screamed. Midoriya! Kirishima yelled. That's crazy. He killed him. That was lethal force. Ida on the comms shouted. Bakugo, you are disqualified. Smoke filled the screen. The cameras in the hallway were melted. All Might! Momo cried out. Stop the match! All Might gripped the microphone, his knuckles white. He was about to call it. He had to call it. No student could survive a direct hit from that. But then movement in the smoke. Wait, Todoroki said, his eyes narrowed. Look, the aftermath. The hallway was black. The concrete was glowing red. Bakugo stood panting, his arm numb from the recoil. He stared into the smoke, a twisted grin on his face. Gotcha. A figure stepped out of the inferno. It was hideous. Izuku's suit was gone from the waist up, melted into slag. His skin was a ruin. It was charred black, peeling away in large, wet chunks. Steam hissed violently from his body. You! Bakugo's eyes widened. You're still standing? Izuku didn't speak. He shuddered. Then, the horror began. The black, charred skin cracked. Underneath, a vibrant, glowing pink slime bubbled up. The dead skin sloughed off, falling to the floor with a wet splat. In seconds, new green skin knit together over the raw muscle. It was a miracle of biology, but it was visceral and gross. It looked like he was shedding a full-body scab and fast forward. Izuku gasped, the air rushing into his newly regenerated lungs. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown circles of adrenaline. He was starving. The regeneration had burned thousands of calories in an instant. He looked at Bakugo. The camouflage was gone. The hero mask was gone. There was only the predator. Is that? Izuku rasped, his voice sounding like grinding stones. Is that all you have? Bakugo took a step back. For the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo felt genuine terror. Not of the boy, but of the thing that refused to die. You monster, Bakugo whispered. You made me this way, Izuku said. He launched. He was slower than before. The regeneration had taxed him, but Bakugo was frozen by shock. Izuku tackled him. They hit the floor hard. Bakugo snapped out of it. Get off! He raised his other gauntlet. Izuku didn't let him fire. He grabbed Bakugo's wrist. Grip strength, 700 kilograms. Crunch. Bakugo screamed as the gauntlet, and the wrists beneath it, were compressed. The mechanism jammed. Let go! Bakugo kicked, driving a knee into Izuku's stomach. Izuku coughed bile, but he didn't let go. He pinned Bakugo's other arm with his knee. He sat straddling Bakugo's chest, his weight heavy and unmovable. Bakugo thrashed, spitting and cursing. I'll kill you! I'll kill you! Izuku looked down at him. The green skin of his face was still steaming. He leaned in close, so close Bakugo could smell the burnt flesh and the chemical tang of his pores. Izuku placed his bare, webbed hand over Bakugo's face. His palm covered Bakugo's mouth and nose. Stop, Izuku commanded. Bakugo tried to bite him. Izuku's glands flared. Secretion type A, paralytic neurotoxin, contact. It wasn't a lethal dose. Izuku had practiced this on himself for years to build immunity. It was just enough to shut down the motor cortex. A cold numbness spread from Bakugo's face down to his neck. Then his chest. Bakugo's eyes went wide. He tried to lift his arms. They wouldn't move. He tried to scream. His tongue felt like a block of lead. If I wanted to, Izuku whispered, his voice trembling with the effort of holding back the lethal dosage, I could stop your heart in 3 seconds, Kaken. The blue-ringed octopus kills in minutes. I am stronger than that. Bakugo stared up at him. The red eyes were filled with tears of rage and humiliation, but the body was limp. But I'm not a villain, Izuku said. And you're not my enemy. You're just in my way. Izuku lifted his hand. Bakugo gasped, sucking in air, but his body remained paralyzed, twitching on the floor. Izuku reached up to his earpiece. Uraraka-san, he panted. The path is clear. The retrieval. 5 floors up. Uraraka heard the message. Deku-kun? She asked. Are you okay? There was no answer. Just heavy, wet breathing. She looked at the weapon. Ida was standing guard, looking frantic. Bakugo? Bakugo, respond. Ida yelled into his comms. Why have the explosions stopped? What is happening down there? Uraraka-kun. Ida spun around, seeing her. You won't get past me. I have prepared the room to be completely empty so you have nothing to float. Uraraka grit her teeth. She looked at the pillars. Midoriya is fighting a monster down there. I have to do my part. I don't need debris, Uraraka said, putting her fingertips together. I have the building. Comet home run. She grabbed a pillar. She didn't detach it. She made the structural integrity of the floor lighter. Then she released it. The floor groaned. The entire building shifted as the battle below had weakened the supports. Ida stumbled. Whoa! Uraraka seized the opening. She floated herself, swimming through the air. Ida recovered. Engine boost. He sprinted at her. But she was already over the weapon. Release. She dropped directly onto the papier-mâché bomb. Captured. She yelled. Hero team wins. All Might's voice announced. The medical wing. The recovery room was quiet. Izuku lay on the bed, an drip in his arm. He wasn't injured anymore. His regeneration had seen to that, but he was exhausted. His calorie count was dangerously low. He was currently eating a pile of nutrient bars Recovery Girl had left him. The door opened. All Might walked in. He wasn't smiling. Young Midoriya. Izuku sat up, swallowing a mouthful of chocolate and protein. All Might. That was reckless, All Might said gently, sitting on the stool. Taking that blast head on. Relying on your regeneration. You know that shortens your lifespan if you abuse it. I know, Izuku looked at his hands. The skin was fresh, pink and tender. But I couldn't dodge. And I had to show him. Show him what? That his explosions don't scare me anymore, Izuku said. That he can't burn me away, All Might sighed. He looked at the boy. He saw the strength, but he also saw the darkness. The way Izuku had pinned Bakugo, the way he had threatened him with poison, it was a line walked very carefully. You showed restraint, All Might said. You could have seriously injured young Bakugo with your toxins. But you used the paralytic. You controlled the dosage under extreme duress. That is what makes you a hero. All Might placed a hand on Izuku's head. But next time, try not to melt your costume. They are expensive. Izuku chuckled weakly. Yes, sir. The review. Back in the classroom, the atmosphere was weird. Bakugo was sitting at his desk. He had been healed by Recovery Girl, the paralysis flushed from his system. But he was silent. He was staring at his hands. When Izuku walked in, the class went quiet. They looked at him differently now. Before, he was the cool, strong frog guy. Now, he was the guy who walked out of fire. He was the guy who made Bakugo Katsuki stop screaming. Midoriya! Kirishima ran over. Dude! That was insane. Are you okay? I'm fine, Izuku smiled tiredly. Just hungry. Momo Yaoyorozu raised her hand. Midoriya-san, while your strategy was effective, I must critique your lack of communication during the separation. And relying on your regeneration is a high-risk gamble. I know, Izuku nodded. I let my emotions get the best of me. I wanted to beat him alone. He looked at Bakugo. Bakugo didn't look back. He stood up, grabbed his bag, and walked out of the classroom without a word. Sunset. Izuku found him at the school gates. Kaken. Bakugo stopped. He didn't turn around. His shoulders were trembling. You were holding back, Bakugo said. His voice was raw. What? The poison, Bakugo turned. His eyes were red-rimmed. You said you could have stopped my heart. You had me pinned. You could have killed me. I'm not a killer, Kaken. That's not the point. Bakugo screamed, tears finally spilling over. I gave it everything. I used my strongest move. And you just shed your skin and looked at me like I was a bug. Bakugo gripped his chest. I'm supposed to be the best. I'm supposed to be the one who wins. How can I beat you if you don't even die when I kill you? It was a paradoxical, irrational scream of a child whose worldview had shattered. Izuku stepped forward. You're strong, Kaken. You're incredible. Your combat sense, your reflexes, they're better than mine. Izuku tapped his own chest. But I was born to survive. That's my power. You can burn me, crush me, freeze me. I'll adapt. I'll evolve. Izuku narrowed his eyes, his pupils becoming slits. If you want to beat me, Kaken, you're going to have to do more than just blow things up. You're going to have to become a predator too. Bakugo stared at him. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. He sniffed, glaring with a hatred that was slowly transforming into something else. Respect? No. Not yet. But acknowledgement. I'm going to crush you, Bakugo swore, his voice low. At the sports festival. I'll figure out a way to kill you that you can't heal from. Just you watch. He turned and stomped away into the twilight. Izuku watched him go. He felt a heavy weight lift off his shoulders. The dynamic had shifted. He wasn't the victim anymore. He was the rival. Ribbit. Izuku jumped. Tsuyu was standing next to him. She had been invisible against the wall. You boys are dramatic, she said, placing a finger on her chin. Tsuyu-chan. Izuku blushed. How long were you there? Long enough to hear you challenge him, she smiled. You're scary, Midoriya-chan. But I think he needed to be scared. She bumped his shoulder with hers. Come on. Let's go get some jelly pouches. You look like dried seaweed. Izuku laughed. Yeah. Let's go. As they walked away, the shadows stretched long behind them. The tadpole was gone. The frog had arrived. And the pond was only getting more dangerous.